Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday and welcome to your Rangers Review morning briefing. It is Monday, the 14th of October. I'm Derek Clark. I'm joined by Joshua Barry. How's it going, Joshua?
Good, Derek. How was your weekend?
Yeah, it was good, thank you. Yep, at a wedding on Saturday, so that was good. And yeah, worse for wear yesterday, it's fair to say. But yep, I spent my international break weekend wisely, I felt. But what about you?
Yeah, fine. It's weird not only a little bit of work, but weird not working at a weekend, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I watched what they do. Yeah, bits and bobs, similar, a bit of a social weekend like you. So congratulations to the happy couple.
Yeah. I'm sure they had a grand time. They're going to
Mm.
Tenerife on Friday for their honeymoon, so not jealous whatsoever. Anyway, people are tuning in because they want to talk all things Rangers, and of course, there is lots to talk about. Despite obviously being, well, we're over the crest of the international break now, freewheeling down towards the return of domestic action, but there is still lots to talk about with regards to the club. You can see in the title, we've posted a year of Clement. Tomorrow marks 1 year since he's been at the helm as Rangers manager. So, yeah, now that for those of you that are Rangers Review Extra members as well, there's a great video from Stevie and Chris on the way later on today with their latest edition of the Talking Points. They analyse his 12 months in charge. But Joshua, on the face of it, approaching that year in charge, he's got one cup in the trophy room and with regards to the League Cup. But he finds himself 5 points behind Celtic and Aberdeen at this juncture of the season. There has been
Yeah.
criticisms from many whether he is the right man to take the club forward. A year in charge, how would you assess his performance?
Oh, I'm glad we got half an hour to discuss it. I mean, Adam and I did our tactics podcast last week where we kind of talked about this in a little bit more detail, looking at, what have we learned about his tactical setup after a year? Is it working? What's not working? So I won't go into too much of the detail that we went into there because yeah, people can go and watch that video if they want, which is on the YouTube channel. You kind of split it into three parts, I think, Derek, where you've got the initial boost, and people might just say it's a new manager bounce, which is true to a degree. You saw that under Beale. Beale had first, I think, didn't only lost once in his first 15 games, and then Giovanni Van Bronckhorst had a smaller, but he still had a new manager bounce. What was slightly different about Clement was he did really inherit a situation that felt pretty on the floor. Rangers had lost 3 of their opening 8 games, but it wasn't just about that. It was about what people had anticipated because Beale had started well. Generally, I'd say in that first season, yes, he fell short in a few games. Yes, he made a lot of mistakes in that summer, but it's easy to forget now. There was a lot of optimism heading to Kilmarnock for supporters on the first day of the 23-24 season. There was a lot of anger at Ibrox in a lot of games. Subsequently, even when Rangers won, the recruitment didn't really, it was certainly in the short term, it didn't work. It didn't give Rangers the uplift that Beale had hoped. So Clement came into a situation with a lot of injuries and a squad that had been built very specifically by a manager who'd been given a lot of control to design a squad effectively for his style. Yes, there were still players who would thrive under Clement, like Dujon Sterling last season, but you take my point. The first 20 league games, I think he won 18 of those, Derek. And when he went away to Kilmarnock and won that game, it wasn't just symbolic because Rangers had, lost at Rugby Park on the opening day of the season, and they kind of won on a night where they probably shouldn't have. I think if you looked at the numbers that night, they weren't great from memory, but it felt significant. And then came Motherwell at home, and whether that was down to Clement, injuries really caught up with Rangers in March. There was issues we can go into about, I thought, his setup and how he approached games and maybe didn't adapt enough when he had so many injuries. But from that Motherwell game, I remember him speaking in the press conference after, effectively talking about this being the moment where Rangers hit the wall. Could they recover their momentum? And really, since then, they haven't been able to, whether you look at the end of last season, when the title bid really fell apart, or whether you look towards the start of this season, where, yes, there's been a lot of change, but a good result or an encouraging result here or there, whether that be a convincing win over Ross County at home, a small thing, but a step in the right direction, or that win away at Malmo, they've been followed up by negatives in return. So I'd kind of sum up into 3 parts. You had the initial bounce, you kind of the intervening period where things fell apart, And since then, obviously the rebuild, and there's a lot of extenuating circumstances around him. There's a lot of questions still about his style, about his approach. Will it work domestically? But really, since Motherwell, I think that's been a bit of the turning point. I don't know what you think on that.
Yeah, is that a concern then? Because that was a wee while ago now, isn't it? And a lot of comments coming in saying what is his style of play, what we should have seen a team improve, given that he's spent 12 months coming up at the helm of James Skeen. With the point here, he says he did well at the beginning, Phil, but I'm beginning to worry about his tactics in the SPFL, but think new players have potential, but with a lot to prove yet. The fact he signed a new contract recently, Joshua, tells me that he's going nowhere at this point in time. We know what the Rangers board think of him, and he will be given time, I reckon, to try and get it right on the pitch. The problem I have, he's got matches coming up. Aberdeen, for example, that is huge for me. He cannot afford to lose that game. You cannot be going 8 points behind at this stage of the season. There is games to negotiate before then, of course, but a Rangers manager has to have a team that is in the title race, and if he doesn't, then a lot of fans will be looking for another managerial change. The thing is, you can't simply sack managers. I mean, this is the point in time when Rangers have sacked, of course, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst departed, Michael Beale came in, he departed around about the same time as well. It's not feasible to keep doing that, is it, year after year? But Clement, he has to be the right guy, or do you see him getting the time? It's a big month from this month, isn't it?
Yeah, look, let's come back to style of play, because I think that's it becomes such a buzzword, doesn't it, when things aren't going well. But I think there's a lot of interesting points around it, and probably a lot of valid points that people are making in the comment section. But yeah, it's a huge month. Is it not Kilmarnock and Aberdeen away basically within the space of 10 days, which is Stevie Clifford, who everyone knows, of course, has got his column on the website this morning, and he put a line in that effectively said Aberdeen and Kilmarnock in 10 days gives the potential. It gives the potential of. Let me start that again. The opportunity of potential or disaster, effectively. There's a potential there for Rangers to go and get a couple of wins, that the type of wins to build back that momentum and that belief, Derek, that hasn't been sustained since the Motherwell game. Or, as you rightly say, Aberdeen have started the season really well. I think their fixture run's been more favourable than Rangers, but still winning 7 of their first 7. Not many teams outside the Old Firm have done that at all in my lifetime, certainly, or haven't been able to sustain that type of form. So it's a really impressive start, going away to a ground where, off the top of my head, Rangers don't have a brilliant record there in the last few years. So yeah, I think it's a really, really big month. Clement, all the noises about Clement have been that he's going to be given time, that Rangers think they've got the right person in place, that there's a lot of change that's happened in the playing squad, and while there might be some short-term growing pains, there is no desire to kind of pull the trigger. You also have to look at the infrastructure. Pull the trigger, I should say, if things were to go badly. But you have to look at the infrastructure around the manager at the moment, Derek. We spoke about this over the weekend, or I think just before the weekend. This time last year, Rangers were about to complete their football boards with the appointment of Niels Koppen as Director of Football Recruitment. That completed a 7-man football board. Only 3 of those remain. One of them is Clement, one of them is Koppen, and one of them is the club doctor, Mark Waller. You've got an interim chairman in place. You've got executives who have left increasingly over the past number of months, and even when that football board was in place, there wasn't a sporting director with jurisdiction necessarily over the managerial appointment, which would have been the case when, for example, Ross Wilson was there. It was a case of the CEO having jurisdiction over the entirety of the football board, who worked to different departments. All that to say is, if Clement was to have a really terrible month and Rangers were to feel like they would move on, which they're not going to do, everything suggests that they're not going to do that, who would make that call, who would make the appointment, who would lead the appointment? So that probably tells a little bit of the story, Derek, of the fact that, as I put it back to you, because I'm interested to know your thoughts, Clement has not just come in to manage a football team. So I agree. I think there's a lot of questions about style of play that need addressed, and this isn't a new conversation. This happened a lot with Van Bronckhorst, that happened with Beale. When Rangers don't win, that's going to come up more and more and more. So there's a lot of questions about that. There's also reality that he's coming to manage a football team, and he's ended up almost being the manager of a football club, speaking and representing decisions that he's not been partial to, or he's not been a part of in the past, that have led Rangers to be in the situation they are at the moment, which maybe gives them a bit more security, Derek, because of that infrastructure around him that isn't there, that I've mentioned. But equally, he's had a bigger job on his hands in the last year than just putting a team on the pitch and just worrying about his tactical setup, unfortunately for him.
Yeah, we all know the situation behind the scenes that needs resolved. It is a concern of many supporters. The state of play in the boardroom and what have you. Rangers need to get those appointments in, and they need to be the correct appointments, and they just need to get guys in to run the club in this moment in time. That's not happening. Few interesting points coming in. Yeah, I get Robert with a point here. He says he's got till January for me. We need to see a sea change in tactics and performances. There's no getting away from that. I mean, I've said it, I think when it was on last week, can't remember what show it was on, and I was talking about the last time we went and enjoyed a Rangers performance. I enjoyed Malmo just because it was partly because it was in the away end and Rangers won, which was good. But domestically, you're thinking back, when was the last time you actually enjoyed watching Rangers and they really put on a show? It's a long time, isn't it? So I think that has to be addressed, and you can understand why there's a few grievances from supporters about pitching up at Ibrox or wherever, and the team more often than not getting over the line, but it's not really enjoyable to watch. So that is something that I would like to see change.
Well,
Yes.
I think when Clement came in, the football was really direct. So for the first and towards the end of last season, when it wasn't working, it was really direct. I think to Rangers' own detriment. There was different levels within last season's performance. So if you think that Dundee game where it was 0-0, it was the one where Sterling came out and was quite critical of his team, justifiably so, afterwards. And Clement actually spoke about the fact that Rangers looked direct too long. You compare that to the 5-0 win under him earlier in the season, and there was a style, there is an idea. No manager does not have a style. It's just whether that style works and whether the line between
It's winning football, isn't it?
Yeah, Clement's first 20 games, no one was complaining about the style of play because he was winning, and that's understandable. That's not a snide comment. That's completely understandable. It's effective. People are going to take effective, pragmatic football that turns defenses, that's pretty territorial, that maybe isn't great to watch, that misses out the midfield. If Rangers were to win 34 out of the league games this season, no one would really care about that, I would argue. But when the results do fall away, and at the start of this season, there is games where you think, what are they trying to do? And it doesn't look great. And off the ball, I think, is a big concern for people because they watch a game like the Lyon game where, yes, Clement can point to the numbers afterwards, and Rangers did have chances. And, if Václav Černý puts the ball into an empty net, it is a different game. But equally, you watch those Lyon wingers run forward time and time again, and that felt like a game they could have really ran away with in the second half if they wanted to. Rangers don't seem to have that stability, however you want to call it, off the ball that they have at different points over the last few years. So style of play last season, it comes in, it's pretty direct, it's pragmatic. He's not got his players in whatever you want to call it. The squad isn't quite balanced out to him. Especially from March onwards, I think that's when it started to go down a bit of a cliff, Derek. And that's when you lost your wingers. We spoke about this a lot last season. But because of that, because Clement didn't change his system, he plays one system, and he isn't really that flexible a manager, I'd say. He speaks about automatisms, which is automatic movements. He wants players to be doing the same thing, to be in familiar territory, to know when the right back's going to run this way and that way. It's quite a common way that modern managers will manage. But when he didn't have wingers, he didn't change system. And I think that had a detrimental effect throughout the team. The middle of the park became increasingly open because the middle of the park then were having to do so much. They were having to lend a hand on either wing and cover the middle. And if you go back to probably the worst performance of last season that Rangers had was the 3-2 defeat away at Ross County, when Rangers conceded something like almost 4 expected goals, the highest value of chance creation they'd conceded since I think they returned to the top flight, or certainly since 2018 it might be. Time and time again, Ross County were able to go through the middle of Rangers. And when people see that, when they see a manager not adapting, I think there is justifiably questions about why did that happen? Is it going to happen again? And ultimately, as we come back to the point of pragmatic football versus entertaining football, you want to see that it works. And to achieve buy-in, I think even where Rangers are just now, where I think they've made some exciting signings in the summer, I think they've brought the average age down, they've brought the wage bill down, they still need more players in now. They still need more marquee signings, I would say. But you can see that there is some things that have changed. But people need to see, I think, a vision of this is how it's going to work eventually, if that's fair. This is something to buy into, like Gerrard had to a degree, although it was a different circumstance. And I think Clement is still to convince a number of people that long-term his style can be successful, if that's fair, Derek.
Yeah. If he doesn't have the players to implement that style, what he wants to play, surely he has to think about adapting formation tactics. And if he doesn't have that, I mean, the tools to do what he wants, then and it's not working, a good manager for me has to look at tweaks, changing things up. Like you say, Joshua, he is a big fan of these wingers, the 10 and the striker up front, but I think, especially games like Lyon the other night there, I think Rangers far too open and he has to sort that out by the time.
Yeah.
I think if it's CSB coming up, of course, they've started well, 2 wins from 2, but you like that they're not at the same level of Lyon, but when you come up against the likes of Tottenham, Man United and what have you, he surely has to think about tactical tweaks there.
Yeah, and to a degree in areas he had. So, for example, I would say that you look at the way Barami plays the left wing role, right? He's doing that differently to how a Cortez would and Shefty's had. So there is some adaptations, I would say, and he hasn't been helped by the injury crisis. And he did speak a lot about feeling like he was going to be able to fix it. And while it's not been as bad this season, it's still not been great, has it? You've got, Ridvan and Cortez, the two that come to mind, two players who were signed to. If you looked at the start of the season, they'd have been players that you thought they need to be big contributors, and we've not really seen either of them play, that much at all. The European games, if you think of beat Betis away or Benfica away, Clement attacked Malmo away. Clement attacked those games with a number 10. He's not really a manager who sits back that much. I just think off the ball, when his team do sit back, he needs to be a bit more zonal. You saw that to a degree against Lyon, and what I mean by that is rather than just going man for man all the time, they're a little bit more protecting the space, a little bit more protecting the centre. I think his style, Derek, because man for man pressing is quite common all around football, but more often than not, I think you see teams will press man for man, and then when you sit in the middle of the pitch, rather than following the movement of individual players, as we saw Rangers do against Celtic, they're sitting in a rough zonal block. I think when Clement's teams sit off, that's when they look like they can be played through. That's when there's space. That's when they can be pulled apart too easily, when they're not being really aggressive. And they were aggressive away at Malmo, weren't they? And the early goal was kind of a testament to that. When they're not aggressive, when you get games like the Lyon game where they go 2 or 3 goals down, and you can't press the game that aggressively then, because it's so clear that Lyon are going to be able to play through you. As we've already mentioned, that was a game that it could have run away from them a little bit more. But I agree with you, when you have a Tottenham or at Man United, we've not spoken about James Tavernier yet. I think Clement still has a bigger decision to make there. I don't think he's called that situation right so far, and he has made bold decisions this summer. Connor Goldson had 2 years left on his contract, and he was allowed to leave the club. That's not a decision that the managers before Clement made, but I don't think he's read the Tavernier situation brilliantly, and that's an area of the pitch where you would say, you do need to make a change and rotate it, as we've discussed to death at this point, to keep players fresh, but also to get suitable players in for different types of games, like that Lyon game. So I can't remember what point you put to me initially, but I think he is changing some things. I think there definitely is an argument that he needs to be a little bit more adaptable or change things more in games. I don't think we've seen him, and Van Bronckhorst in a European setting would be able to do that really. Apparently, wouldn't he change shape or he'd make tactical tweaks here or there? That maybe wasn't quite as much of a requirement in domestic football, but I don't think we've seen Clement change games as much from the side of the pitch, and that's maybe a little bit of a question mark that has to be answered.
Yeah, now there's a comment criticising his substitutions as well, saying he's reactive. But I mean, coming up a year tomorrow, Joshua, if he's pitching up with his report, looking for his report card, what are you giving him out of 10? I think
out of 10.
Out of 10, yeah. What are you giving him?
That's a good question. I'm gonna put it back to you immediately after. I would say it's hard. It's hard, right? I will give you a number. I'm not going to give you a politician's answer. I would say it's hard because if you're asking about the overall job, right, and not just the style of play on the pitch, because that's the thing I don't think you can get away from here, is that even things like his squad this summer. If you speak to people about the pre-season this summer, yes, Clement had time, and I think that elements of what he's trying to do on the pitch should be more pronounced. And he's not a director of football, so he's not going out and recruiting players, for example, but he is involved in up to a certain process of watching those players. Normally, in a normal club in a normal summer, you're signing 5-6 players. So you're maybe getting down to the final stages with 15 to 20 players max. That number is way higher for Clement. So and what I mean by that is so much time was spent for him this summer trying to help rebuild that squad, which was at the mercy of a lot of different decisions, as he mentioned quite a lot, from individual players who maybe didn't want to go, or individual players who took a long time to go. Things like the not getting into the Champions League, which, yes, the red card played into that, but also Rangers weren't. I couldn't say with conviction they were going to win that game against Dynamo Kyiv at home. So there's been a lot of circumstances outside of on the pitch. If you take me back to the number, I'm going to say 6, because he started really well. I think the drop off, while there was all those injuries to somewhat explain it, I think that he should have done something a little bit different, and he should have been able to mitigate that fall a little bit more, because it was really dramatic from that Kilmarnock game onwards, and that Motherwell game at home as well. And yes, you would understandably point to a lot of different things, but I would say 6, with the potential of, look, this month if Rangers are to go and get a couple of good results, I think this month really dictates it, because then suddenly if Rangers are able to get a good couple of results, you can say, look, they've had a lot of change this summer, 16 players out, 11 players in. The first couple of months are a little bit difficult, but now you're starting to see, as Clement said you would in October and November, a better version of this team. If you don't get those results, then I think the doubts you're seeing at the moment are going to remain. So I'm giving him a 6. I think that's fair. What about you? Maybe it's 6 is maybe harsh because he won a trophy, but I'll put it back to you.
No, well, 6. I've not seen anyone giving him more than a 6 in the comments. It's between a sort of 4 and a 6. I would give him a 5. I think, started off really well. I had us all believing that Rangers would go on and win the title from nowhere. But like you say, Joshua, since that Motherwell match, concerns have been growing whether he is the right man at the helm. And like I said earlier on, this is a big month for him.
Yeah,
big matches coming up. You can't. We need to eat into that gap at the top. But I don't believe that Rangers will be able to catch Celtic at this moment in time, just based on what I've witnessed so far. I would love to be proven wrong, but he gets a 5 for me. Certainly, room for improvement, as the old teacher saying it would go. So jury is very much out. But a year in charge tomorrow, Philippe Clement. So like I say, there was Joshua mentioned earlier on Stevie's piece on the website. He'll be on with Chris for their latest episode of The Talking Point. I urge you to go and check it out, folks. That will be available for the Rangers Review Extra members beforehand, before being made available to all. Just on Clement, and of course, Macca got in touch earlier on. He says, "You're in charge of PC, celebrates with another slight knock to Connor Barron. Happy days." This is news I just noticed this morning. It's been reported that he'll not be part of the Scotland matchday squad under 21 side for their qualifier against Kazakhstan tomorrow. It's picked up a slight knock, not believed to be a significant issue. Joshua, I don't know the full extent of that, but it's always a concern when these boys head off with their international teams that they get injured representing their countries, and just hope that it's nothing too serious, because he has been a pretty much ever present in the Rangers team this season.
Yeah, he has, and it's not an area of the pitch where Rangers have much depth, is it? So I thought Raskin was good, as we've kind of discussed a little bit on the show over the course of the last week. I thought he was good in the game against St Johnstone before the international break. The report suggests it's nothing too serious, which I'm sure Clement and co will be crossing their fingers on, because Barron's been really important. And you look at that Aberdeen game, I'm sure that will be a busy evening for him up there, going back back to where he came through as a player. Yeah, but Rangers need everyone they can get in the middle of the park at the moment. We've not spoken that much about Mohamed Diamande over the course of the international break. Derek, maybe we will towards the end of the week, but I still think he's to really kind of click into gear this year. There's some circumstances again around that, in my opinion, because I'm not I'm not entirely convinced that the role he's playing this season is better for him than last season.
Yeah.
When he initially came into the club, but Barron has been the standout midfielder so far. It's going to be interesting to see if Raskin plays a little bit more at the number 6. I'd quite like to see that in certain games, because again, I think Raskin is better suited to the deeper role under Clement and the role higher up the pitch. And yeah, I'd imagine that if Barron is fit, it is him who plays in that role away at Kilmarnock, which is going to be a really difficult fixture for Rangers to, restart their Premiership campaign.
Yeah, absolutely is. But Kilmarnock, I mean, they haven't really started the season well, have they? They are struggling at the bottom end of the table, but you can bet your bottom dollar that they'll be well up for that game. Always slightly concerned going out there on the plastic surface that Sunday, 12 o'clock kickoff as well. Not a big fan of those early kickoffs either. Just give me 3 points and get back up the road, and then let's move on to the Europa League fixture against FCSB the following Thursday. But big games on the horizon for Rangers. Big night on the horizon for us, Joshua. Andrew Phillips raised a point that I flagged earlier on. When we were talking about Clement, he says a style of play requires a target man like Mark Hateley. Oh, I would love a guy, prime Mark Hateley up front for Rangers at this moment in time. But he will be joining us on our new live show, which takes place in London, of all places. We're heading down this Wednesday for a live Q&A, an interview with Big Mark. There'll also be a meet and greet, and talking all things Rangers about his time at the club and also what he makes of the team this season. It'll be interesting to hear his thoughts. Now, there are still tickets available for the night, folks, and we do have a special code to get 50% off a ticket. So any London-based or any southern-based bears down there in England, if you fancy a night talking all things Rangers, then come on, head over to the Volley in London. If you use the code RR50 at the checkout, you get 50% off your ticket price. The link is in the description below this video. And touched on it before, Josh. It's been a long time since we're up on stage as ever, but always good fun talking all things Rangers with guys that come along to the live shows.
Yes, especially especially at the moment when obviously as the tone this morning suggests, I'm being slightly facetious, but we always try and make it interesting, even when the interest maybe isn't quite as much there as it has been at other points. But yeah, looking forward to it. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about Mark's time, a lot about Mark's time, as well as the current situation at the moment, and a little bit of an extended conversation that we have on the podcast every day. So looking forward to seeing who's down there, and obviously heading down with you, which is always fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Cannot wait for that. So go and get your tickets, folks, if you fancy a night talking all things Rangers. Those are just a heads up. We'll record the Q&A tomorrow. I know that the talking point, as I mentioned, Chris and Stevie, is being released today. So we'll get the Q&A show on the air tomorrow. So for those of you that are Rangers Review Extra members, then please tune in for that. We'll record around 2 p.m. as normal. But we'll wrap up there for now. Big thanks to Joshua, as ever, and to you all for tuning into the show. As always, it is very much appreciated. If you are a big viewer to the show and you've not subscribed, hit that subscribe button and then hit the bell. Make sure that you won't miss a video whenever we go live. And of course, the morning briefings, not the only videos that we've got on the channel, plenty of other content on there as well. Right, if I don't speak to you tomorrow, enjoy your Monday, and I'll speak to you a little later on. Bye for now.